Welcome, advanced topic students, to section 5.2. This is factoring. So if you're taking algebra, algebra 2, advanced topics, this is how you factor trinomials. So really this is the trinomials section. Now you're probably wondering, what is the Italian flag? Well, there's 3 sections to the Italian flag, but mostly this is in honor of Don Bosco Day, which was last week. Let's go ahead and start with example 1. Example 1 is x squared plus 9x plus 20. How do we factor this? Well, our goal is to get a trinomial into this setup where we have 2 parentheses for the 3 terms. Now, you can see that we have this first part here. This is our first term. Then we have this middle section. This is our middle term. And then we have this last part, which is our last term. There's 3 parts to a trinomial, first, middle, and last, and that's our goal, is to get it so we can put it into binomial. Okay, so this is a binomial because it's got 2 parts, and there are 2 binomials. Okay, so we have one binomial here and a second right here. Now, we want the binomial to be set up where x times x, now this is the first slot, okay, the first slot in both binomials. We want x times x to be equal to our first term. Okay, so first term is our x times x. The second part is we want the number, okay, as you can see, that's our second slot there, our number times x plus our number times x to be equal to our middle term. This one's the most complicated. This is the one that gives people the most trouble, but that is what we're looking for. And then our last term is simply the last number times the last number. The second slot times the second slot, the last term in both binomials times each other, and that's going to give us our last term. So this is the blueprint of what we're looking for, and we're going to see if we can make it happen. Now, the first term's rather easy. We're looking for x times x, okay, and this time, in this case, we're going to simply get something rather simple, okay, but I think I'm going to start with our last term because that is the most, our middle term. That's generally our place of emphasis because it is the toughest one to handle. So we're going to start there by handling our middle term. Now, how do we handle our middle term? Well, the last term usually holds the key for how we handle our middle term. So here we see our last term is 20. So we're going to think of factors of 20, right? Because our last term is what 2 numbers times themselves, or what 2 numbers multiplied together give us our last term. Well, in this case, we have a bunch of factors for 20. We could have 1 times 20. We could have 2 times 10. We could have, oh, by the way, and this is a positive 20. Make sure to include that. We could have 4 times 5. Okay, and I think that's it, actually. 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. And really, we could have 20 times 1, okay, but that's the same thing. 20 times 1 is the same thing as 1 times 20. It's when we get into negatives that we have to change things up a little bit. But now that we have some factors of 20 listed, we want to know which have a sum of the middle term. Well, how did I come up with that? Well, here we see the middle term after we FOIL. Okay, so if we FOIL, we get first times, we get first times first, first times last, and then we have this and that. When we FOIL, we end up with these 2, the last times, and that's, let me highlight that for you. We have this plus this, okay? We're going to end up with those 2 products added together, the sum of those 2 products of the first and last and the inside, the outer and the inside. So we're looking for what 2 products will give us a sum, okay? What 2 products will give us a sum, which have a sum of the middle term? Well, if we add 1 plus 20, we get 21. That's no good, okay? So this one's no good. Okay, no good. Then we get 2 plus 10, and that gives us 12, okay? And we see that it's 9. Okay, we're looking for 9, not 12, so that one's no good. Then we move on to 4 plus 5, and we see that equals 9. So that is what we are indeed looking for, if I can draw this 9 a little bit better. So we're going to say, okay, 4 and 5 are the factors we're going to use. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put 4 and 5 as our last term. And we need to make sure they're both positive because, again, we're looking for a positive 20. So we need to make them positive 4 and positive 5. So we're done with our last term. Okay. Now, our first term, usually when there's no coefficient, okay, when there's no coefficient in front of x squared, this is what I'm talking about. If there's a coefficient, things change a little bit. It becomes a little bit more complicated. But I'm just talking about where there's no coefficient of the variable. So the coefficient, when it's 1, is fairly simple. We're just going to put x and x here. Okay. So we're going to check now. Is it x plus 4 and x plus 5? Is that the factored form? Well, let's FOIL. Okay, when we FOIL this, we get x squared plus 5x. Then we're going to FOIL the next thing. We're going to get 4 times x and 4 times 5, so we get positive 4x plus 20. What happens when we combine all of that under one roof, so to speak? Well, we get x squared, these are the only like terms, plus 9x plus 20. Is that what we started with? Yes, it is. It is what we started with. That's how we can check our answer. But our answer, when we're factoring, is this right here. This is our answer right here. Okay? X plus 4 times the quantity x plus 5. Right there. Okay? So it's factored, and the reason why it's called factored is because we have two things times each other. We have this on the left times this on the right. Okay? Two parentheses times each other, and that is why it's called factoring, because it's multiplication of two things. Okay? So that's factored. Now, let's go over some pattern recognition. This is to help us kind of understand how to do these problems a little bit quicker. So pattern recognition, is it positive or is it minus? Okay, that's usually the thing that gives people the most trouble with these examples. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, first we're going to talk about A is the variable. Okay, so usually it's X, but A is the variable. D is a number and B is a number, but B is going to be bigger than D. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Usually there's one number that's bigger than the other. So the first term, okay, if I'm going to assume it's all positive, so we're going to factor it to at least make so the first term is going to be positive. Remember, this is a factor term of two binomials, but as you multiply them out, you're going to get three terms, a trinomial, okay? So if we have the first term positive, the middle term positive, and the last term positive, then it's fairly easy. We have all of these are going to be positive, okay? Positive, positive. Both terms, both binomials are going to be positive. Now, what if we have the first term positive, the middle term negative, and the last term positive? Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have two minus signs for our binomials. Okay? The reason being, negative times negative will give us a positive last term, and then we add the two negatives together, we're going to get a negative middle term. Now, what if we have the first term positive, the middle term positive, and the last term negative? Well, in order to get the last term negative, we're going to have a positive times a negative. Okay, positive times a negative, but the middle term being positive means the bigger number needs to be positive. So we want to make the B positive. B is bigger than D. We want to make the B positive and the D negative, okay? And the reason why we do that is because we have this sign here, okay? This middle term is positive, therefore the bigger number needs to be positive also. Now, what happens if the middle term is negative and the last term is also negative? Well, again, that means we need to have opposite sides inside our parentheses, inside the binomial. But this time, we need the smaller number, or excuse me, the bigger number to be negative, not positive. Remember, it's always going to follow. The bigger number always wins. So if the middle term is negative, then the bigger number is also negative. So we have here the bigger number is B. So the middle term is negative, okay? So if the bigger number B is negative, then the middle term is going to be negative. And of course, the last term is negative because we have a positive times a negative. So that's a quick pattern recognition. This is the end of this video. Make sure to stay tuned because we're going to go over some examples. And I'm going to try to go over best practices, how to do this quickly. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more.